Well, Happy New Year, everybody, and welcome back to the Book Marketing Tips and Author Success Podcast. This is Penny Sansevieri and Amy Cornell. Amy, Happy New Year to you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
How excited are you for 2022?
I just read a meme that said we shouldn't talk like that. It was something like, go in quietly, don't upset it, things like that. Like,
oh, right.
Nobody say 2022 is going to be my year. Like, let's just not set everybody up for failure. Just like, just ease in gently.
But at the same time, what we're attempting to do with this particular podcast and the next couple of podcasts as we're kicking off the year is we really are attempting to offer authors some ways to help ramp up their 2022 so it actually can be their year, even if you don't want to say it out loud. Right?
Exactly.
Even if you don't want to jinx it and say it out loud. And I want to just mention that the print book of From Book to Bestseller is coming out or is already out by the time this podcast airs. It launched on January 3rd, so I'm very excited about that. Phew. And I'm considering doing an audiobook on it. I mean, I guess we'll see. I don't know. I had a lovely, lovely, lovely audiobook person contact me. She's got a great resume. And so we'll see if people really want this information in audiobook. And we're going to talk a little bit more about audio as the year progresses. And I addressed actually in my predictions post on our blog, if you haven't read it, about the importance of audio. So definitely take a look at that. And that's one of the reasons why I'm considering it for From Book to Bestseller. So this podcast, The Profitable Author, or How to Be More Profitable as an Author, is really not about, it's about making money, but it's a little bit different than I think what you might expect. One of the things that Amy and I have observed over the years is that a 7 or 8 figure author they embody certain qualities. And this isn't about changing your personality. This is really about how to manage this business, your business that is book publishing. And one of the first things, she and I, we created a sort of a list of things that we want to talk about. And Amy and I are going to kind of take turns on this. I don't know how many there are. There might be 9. There could be 10. There could be 12. I didn't actually count them. But the first one is emotional attachments. So emotional attachments are funny things. And it's difficult to say this to authors because I realize that you are emotionally attached to your book, right? So you love your book, especially, memoirs and fiction and whatnot. It's like you do become emotionally attached to it. But at the end of the day, your book is a product, right? And when you become emotionally attached, you lose perspective and you lose the ability to make really sound decisions. One of the things that authors often get emotionally attached to is the book cover. And the book cover, which we're going to talk about a little bit later in the podcast, is so important that I'm going to suggest to you that you consider, really stepping back from what you perceive to be like the perfect book cover, because is it really? And we've talked about this on podcasts about, it has to look like the other books on the shelf on your Amazon book page and things like that. And this is one of the reasons, and I know we're going to reiterate this as we continue to uncover some of these ways to be more profitable, but you really want to surround yourself with people who are going to give you solid and constructive feedback, meaning that your editor should make you a better writer, right? You do not want to work with an editor that you are BFFs with. I mean, it's fine that you're like, you like the people that you've hired. I think that's obviously good, but you want people who really are going to make you a better author. And I always say, if your editor doesn't at one point make you want to throw shit or make you cry, excuse me, then you need to find another editor who does. My editor always makes me a better author, I think. So emotional attachments are definitely, they're unhealthy. And they can really impact your progress.
Yeah, they're really limiting. And
yes,
on the other end of the spectrum are attachments or hangups with investments that you have to make along the way.
Yes.
So there are a lot of things that you just really have to invest some money in to get a book out there, at least one that people are going to buy.
Right.
Let's put it that way. So, editors cost money, good book covers cost money. There's a lot along the way that will cost you some money. This is not, we've done an episode on why, launching a book is like starting a business, or becoming an author is like starting a business. Money does have to go into it, but you really have to learn to compartmentalize that that's just part of this process. And you have to kind of leave it where it happens. Like, you paid for your editor, they did a good job, check that off as a win, instead of, it's a lot better way to view it versus saying like, oh my gosh, I spent so much money on my editor a year later still, and same thing with the cover, trying to cut corners on what you want to spend on your cover because you're thinking more about, you're so attached to the amount of money. Like, I get it. Everybody has a budget. We're not saying that like you should have no budget when you release a book by any means. That's not what we're saying. But I think being realistic and compartmentalizing that this is part of this process. And then once it's over with, and assuming you get something that you're happy with, then you have to move on. That's it. Leave it in the past, move on to the next stage, and put your energy and focus on that next stage.
Right. That is absolutely true. Another one, and this is going to sound really weird, but I actually love it. And I've used it a lot in blog posts and talking to authors, is you want to fail fast, right? None of us wants to fail. But not everything that we do or launch is going to be successful. So if you've launched a book and the book is just doing, you're doing everything that you possibly can for it, and the book is not doing well, maybe it's the cover. Maybe it's time. Maybe even though the book is 30 days old, maybe the cover is really distracting rather than attracting. 7-figure authors rebrand frequently. They redo covers. And I've known some authors who actually change up their covers annually. And part of the reason why they do that is maybe because they learn, or they've changed the way that their brand looks. Authors get hung up a lot of times on, like we talked about, emotional attachments. They get hung up on their book covers. I love it so much. And the best thing that you can do for your book is, in some cases, change up the cover. And it's not just about the failing fast part. Is not just about, well, your cover was awful and that's why your book failed. When you fail fast, you learn and you move on. So a lot of times what happens is that authors get stuck in failure. They get stuck in that it's not going well, the world hates me, the flowers have died. Like, they get stuck in this failure loop. And what I want you to consider, and I use the book cover just as an example because it's easy and it's a visual one to talk about on the podcast. But what I'm talking about really is I'm talking about realizing that something has failed and then moving on, and then figuring out a way to turn that around and make that successful. So using failure as a stepping stone, there's a phrase, I think, and I can't think of who put it in a book, but failing up, right? So using failure as a stepping stone to keep moving in the right direction. Don't get caught up in, this isn't working or that's not working, and I suck, and Facebook ads suck, and Amazon sucks, and everybody hates my book. That's not going to benefit you. And that is not going to get you to your 7-figure author goal, which obviously I think probably most of you, if not all of you listening, want to get to.
Right. Exactly. I mean, it's a good goal to have.
Yeah, it's definitely a good goal to have.
And I think another one is also, in order to be profitable long-term, you have to realize you can't cut corners in a lot of areas, so again, we're harping on the cover, but that is a huge area. That is literally your first impression. Cutting corners on the cover that gets produced for your book is not going to help you long-term. That is going to affect your sales in the future. Cutting corners on getting a good editor, that's always going to cause you problems. That one actually is really scary, honestly, because that's also part of your reputation. You know, a cover can be, as you said, Penny, can be changed and can be changed frequently and can be changed very easily. And that doesn't really stick with people. But once you start having reviews out there that say that the book wasn't well edited, or that you know what I mean? Those are just kind of, those are really like turning the knife.
Yeah.
Because that does really have a lot more lasting impact on your brand overall than maybe a bad cover that you switched out. Like once people see the new one, they're like, oh, I like that. And they've forgotten about the old cover.
Yeah.
So to your point, failing quickly, failing fast, like that's why the cover. But yeah, don't be afraid to invest in the right things, and don't cut corners thinking it's going to improve your bottom line in the long run. Because if anything, those cutting corners are really going to affect your ability to sell the book long term. So you're saving money now because you won't be making much of it later.
Right. Right. That's a very good way to put it. But it is really true that authors this isn't about, like, let me just be clear to say, this isn't about calling us up and saying, hey, Amy and Penny, I want to spend $20,000 on my marketing. I mean, that's great. We love that. Right. But this is really about, realizing that your book is a business. It needs a budget. You need to be realistic about what it's going to take to succeed, and not be afraid to invest that money. And the other thing that I see authors doing wrong is listening to the wrong people. Now, sometimes it's hard to know who the right people are versus who the wrong people are. Like, I get that. But I think that somebody who's trying to sell you something, right? Somebody who's trying to sell you like a, $5,000 learning program where you get to be an Amazon expert or whatever. Somebody who's trying to sell you, generally people who are trying to sell you something may not always give you the best advice. And listen, I get on the phone with authors all the time, and they ask me for my input. And obviously I'm talking to them because they may want to work with us. And I will preface a lot of what I say in that, whether you hire us or not, and I mean that very sincerely, here is what I would recommend. And I think that the other authors can be a great source of information, but it can also be a little bit discouraging. Right. So you want to be kind of careful. You want to be really cautious about the advice that you allow to kind of filter in. And I see this a lot with Facebook groups. Don't get me wrong. I talked about Facebook groups in the December podcast, like, oh, be careful. I think Facebook groups, the right kind, can be really, really helpful to authors. But much like any social media presence, most of us don't go on to social media and share the bad stuff. Right. So it's rare when you see authors on Facebook who are just like, oh my, the flowers have died, nobody's buying my book, blah, blah, blah. Like, that's a rare thing. And it is just, again, just be cautious about where you're getting your advice. Like if somebody says, oh, this one thing that I did sold, I sold 10,000 books or something. Most of the time, I would say 99.9% of the time, one single thing will not net you a huge amount of book sales. It's usually, in almost every case, it's cumulative, with the exception of, Reese Witherspoon featuring your book on her Instagram. Everything else is cumulative.
But even then, how many of those books have terrible covers, Penny?
Yes. Thank you. Exactly.
Yeah. So if there is, it might seem, I always think about that because we do say that a lot, that there's no like quick and easy path to success with a book. And I realize the authors that do end up making it in the news because like, wow, they came out of nowhere. I guarantee you, they don't feel they came out of nowhere.
Oh, for sure.
We feel that way because we see this like glamorized version of like, wow, she had like 3 books already and this one just took off and now she's a millionaire. It's like, you know how much time and effort that woman has put in, like so much. And so, you know what I mean? She went through everything y'all listening have been through, and probably more because she finally did get to that piece or that, level of success. So she put in the time and the effort. Nobody is an overnight success, even when it kind of seems like that when they get covered or because, Reese finally features them. And another element of a profitable author is that they realize change is a good thing. And this kind of complements to some degree the failing fast, but you don't have to fail in order to change, but they complement each other really well. And I would say a good example, Penny, is that we get a lot of our, I shouldn't say a lot, but a fair number of authors that come to us and they are already on the big bestseller lists and they are doing so well, by most people's standards, but they realize that in order to do more, they need to change something that they've been doing, right? Like that next level always involves changing something, improving something. You know what I mean? There has to be something different that happens because you don't get to do the same thing over and over again forever and continually build on your success. That's just not typically how that works. So there are a lot of easy things that you can change, your descriptions on your books, your taglines, your subtitles, if you're self-published, especially. These are all things that are great similar to what you had said, that some authors just change their book covers just to keep people interested.
Yes.
Because they go, oh, that looks new. What's going on there? And it may not be a new book, but it's a totally different image and it's modern. It's in line with what people are expecting to see. And that in and of itself can do so much. And same thing with all those free elements that you can do on Amazon with your description, with your subtitle. Those first 4 lines are really the strongest. You have to plan on them not clicking the read more, expander. So if you can't get it in before the read more, there's a very good chance you're going to lose somebody. And if you approach it with that mindset, you're challenging yourself to do the best work you can with your description.
Yeah.
Using your keywords, changing your keywords regularly. We talk about that a lot. And I think a lot of authors, I realize figuring out how to find the right keywords is challenging. And then once they do it, they're like, thank God that is over. But it's really not over because keywords mimic user behavior and shoppers change what they're looking for on Amazon and how they find things. And with trends in specific genres or hot topics for nonfiction, those things are constantly changing and evolving. So it just makes sense that your keywords should also be changing and evolving with that as well. We typically recommend reviewing your keywords at least once a quarter, once every 3 or 4 months, ideally. But you should definitely be doing it at least twice a year. We always say major holidays, changes in the season, changes in just our general patterns and behaviors as a society, summer reading, that's a thing. So those kind of pieces, just make sure that you're open to change, because if you're open to changing things and making things better on a regular basis, you are going to be drawing more attention to your book, and that will definitely affect your bottom line.
Yeah. And, again, change is good. And you could be very surprised what you may find if you make a book cover changes. And I know this all sounds like such an investment, but back to Amy's point about not being scared to spend money, it is an investment, and it's an investment in your success. The other piece that I think is worth mentioning are missed opportunities, right? So missed opportunities, it's not just turning down an interview, although I'm wildly opposed to turning down interviews. We had an author not long ago who turned down something, and I'm not a fan of that. I always encourage authors to, don't leave money on the table when it comes to doing interviews or reviews or anything like that. But the other missed opportunity is in formats. So have you produced an audiobook? I know they're not inexpensive to do. I get it. Maybe your particular title, maybe your particular genre doesn't do as well in audiobook. Some of my books that have lots of links and images and things like that, those are very, very difficult to produce in audiobook. And it's also not a great experience for the reader. But from book to bestseller, like I mentioned at the onset, I'm thinking about putting that in audiobook. And I was talking to the audiobook person, and she said, there's really a lot that you can do as long as you have minimal links and minimal images. So consider doing an audiobook. You could be leaving some money on the table. offering signed book copies off of your website. Do you need a large print edition of your book? This is something that authors so often forget. Doing a large print edition could potentially help you get into libraries, because libraries really love large print editions, right? So, there's just a lot of, I think figuring out where the missed opportunities are, where you're leaving money on the table. And, once you have your book done, creating a large print edition of a book, or if you only have an ebook, to do a paperback and maybe a hardcover. And conversely, do you not have an ebook and you only have a paperback book? Put it all out there, because you just never know who's going to buy what. And I think the missed opportunity piece of it is it's a big deal for most authors.
Right. Absolutely. And I think that I love when we still get people that say, and I know Penny's going to go to this, when people go, I'm just going to see how people respond to the ebook before I do a print book.
Oh, I want to be right against the wall. Yeah.
I know. Because it's like, you're not, and I get to some degree, I kind of understand where you're coming from with that. Like, you're being cautious that in some ways, I get the psychology behind that. But at the same time, you're essentially saying, like, I'm going to see how many people that only like ebooks are interested in my book before I do something for people that don't like ebooks. It's like, wait a minute, when you frame it that way, how does it make sense? Yeah. But another important piece, profitable authors, their readers, people that love their genre, know how to find them.
Oh, yes.
They are not hidden, These are not like, wow, how did I not know about this person? Profitable authors are known, and they're known for a reason, and not only because they eventually hit that bestseller list. They were getting in front of the right people early, and they build on that. And so, you have to figure, are readers able to find you? We still get authors that come to us and say, I don't really think I need a website, or I don't want to deal with that because I'm not technologically, inclined and all that stuff. But it's like, it's same thing. We hear that with social media, and we're kind of at this point now, especially with everybody, we all did more online shopping in the last year and a half. Like, things are online. This is the reality now. The whole putting off the website and the social media is not really a thing anymore.
Yeah.
You really have to have, and they don't have to be overly expensive, and you don't have to be on all of the things. We're not saying you have to get an account on every social media platform. That's the exact opposite, actually. But having even a basic website that shows that you're taking yourself seriously says a lot to your potential buyers as well. And, a basic site, actually, I love a basic site, Penny, because it makes it easy to navigate. I think a lot of times when people want to be impressive with their website and have a lot of stuff going on, they forget the user experience.
Yeah.
And so, when you included a stat on here that for every click that readers have to make, you lose another 10% of your potential buyer audience. Like,
yes.
That's crazy to think about.
Crazy, isn't it? I know.
Yes. And so I think this whole concept that websites have to be super expensive and super exciting and have a lot of cool features in order to be beneficial is very misguided. The simpler, the cleaner, the prettier, the more straightforward, the better. Honestly, it's a better experience for the user, because how many of us have a bunch of time to kill now and click around on these website? Like, literally nobody.
Right. Exactly.
You really don't want to overcomplicate things. And I say the same about social media now, is that the reality is most people have social media at their fingertips. Even if they only check it once a week, it is still something that now, as a general rule, people are used to having as a resource, and not being there on the platforms that are most relevant to your audience really cuts down on their access to you.
Yeah.
Because, I follow a lot of things on Instagram, for example, simply because I'm interested in that topic, and that's where I get a lot of great info, and it keeps me interested and engaged, and I learn things, and it's so simple. And so I think just reframing your mindset in regards to what a website means and what being on social means can really make a huge difference.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I also, so this is something really fun. Merchandise your stuff. And I was listening to a class, and the gal was talking about all the stuff that she sells. She's a fiction author in particular. And I got really excited. I emailed Amy. I'm like, oh, let's sell all the things. And basically Amy just kind of rolled her eyes at me because that is just how it goes between us when I come up with some crazy idea. For us, this particular thing probably would be not necessarily ideal. But at the same time, when I talk about merchandising your stuff, so yes, when you think merchandising your stuff, you're thinking, put it on a coffee cup, put it on a t-shirt, put it on a tote bag, whatever. But think about the other things that you could be doing. So I think that those things that I just mentioned work really well, particularly for fiction authors. Or if you have some other kind of a brand, right? Like we sometimes work with children's books and things like that, where that whole merchandising stuff actually does better and sells even more than the books themselves. And we've worked with a couple of children's books that have done that over the years. But you think about all of the other things that you could be selling. And when I talk to nonfiction authors, this comes up actually a lot. And I'm talking about maybe creating journals, creating workbooks, creating other types of things that isn't necessarily like quote unquote merchandising, but what is tangibly attached to your book that you have not yet considered doing? Because that could be a really great way to bring more people in. And to some degree, I mean, we do that with our stuff, right? So we have the Amazon video series that we offer, and we have some other things that we do, but putting more stuff out there, the more places that people can find you with your stuff, the more paths lead back to your book.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, because it's not always just about your book. It's about again, back to the user experience, so if you did write a book where you are giving someone advice on how to grow their business, for example, and you have used a great planner in the past, like you said, Penny, making those connections, making it one-stop shopping. Like if you get my book, I know I can help you. This is the planner I recommend. I actually, you know what I mean? And having it kind of as a package deal, especially if you can do that on your website. And again, giving them that one-stop experience to kind of really kick things into high gear. I think that's fabulous. Like you mentioned, the children's book, once you start having other things, you also, I think, open the door for, especially for fiction, but gift giving, things like that. Like you really elevate what people can view your brand as. Like, this is not just a book now. Now I can actually create a gift out of it. It's a book and a little stuffy and you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or I've got this book and, a girlfriend of mine is starting her own business, and look, I can get this book along with this planner that's recommended and this cool sticker that has this great, motivational quote on it. Like, and all of a sudden it's like, it's a whole different product, a whole different level of what you're able to offer. So that's a really cool concept that I think, and also you can get really creative with it. And for the most part, it's not a huge investment either. It just, you don't have to order 500. Actually, just don't order 500 of anything.
Yeah.
Start small, and, it would be a high quality problem to have if you had to place another order for this cool stuff that you've come up with that you can link your book to.
Yeah.
Another element is the back matter. Successful authors know how to keep readers in their funnel and create return buyers. So the back matter of the book, it sells your next book. It points them to previous books you've released. This is just, it's almost one of these things that, a series author, I think for the most part, they're like, yeah, this is an absolute necessity. You can't get away without doing this. But kind of adopting that methodology that a lot of series authors already realize is absolutely critical, but just always sending people back to other elements of your brand. So whether it's a book, whether it's just your website because you offer coaching or consulting or free downloads, like anything that you can do while you have their attention. They've finished your book. They, fingers crossed, right, had a really positive experience. That is such a prime time to keep them in your funnel and to create that return buyer mentality. Yes, absolutely. And I love back matter. We use it all the time for my books. I think it's it is a great way to keep people interested in what you're selling. So the next piece of this, which I am such a huge fan of, is committing to learning.
Now, I'm not necessarily suggesting that you have to go and do all the things yourself, but I think that it's really important. I believe that authors who are willing and committed to learning, as much as it sounds inundating, right, to learn, the more that you are committed to learning, the better you will be, because you'll also understand more, and there's less opportunity to be taken advantage of, really, also. And I think that it's important. I mean, I think, understanding how to use a particular, you don't want to be out there. We've had authors that get confused just trying to log on to Goodreads, right? You don't want to be out there and one of those authors who can't figure out how to access her account on her KDP page. Those things do not empower you to success. So learn how to use Amazon ads, even if you want to outsource the Amazon ads to us or another company or something like that. Learning, understanding, having a basic knowledge of this stuff. I will tell you, just as an example, I took a lot of courses on Google AdWords. We used to do Google AdWords. We don't do those anymore. I took a lot of courses on Google AdWords. I can't even say the term Google AdWords without getting a rash. Like, I loathe Google AdWords. And I'm sorry, Google, if you're listening, please give us good ranking. We love all the things. I did not enjoy doing Google AdWords, but I'm very glad that I took these classes, because it helped me to spend less money, obviously, on the ads. But it also helped me to understand what I was doing and making the right choices for the company and things like that. So commit to learning, absolutely important. And any author who is out there making money and just really killing it in their success does commit at least sometime every month to learning something new.
Right. That's a really good point, because even if, like you said, Penny, even if you do plan on hiring some pieces out, for the most part, especially if you're listening to this podcast and getting tips for being more profitable, you're probably not in a position to have somebody do all the work for you until the end of time.
Yeah.
So we run into this a lot, like Penny said, with some of our clients that get really frustrated learning how to access some of these platforms and kind of the basic functions of them and things like that. And we try to remind them, as delicately as possible, but also motivating them that we're not going to be with you forever, realistically, so at some point, this will help you. It may be frustrating now, but you're investing in your long-term success by having a working knowledge. And truly, like you said, Penny, knowledge is confidence. So yes. A lot of the times, when people get frustrated, it's because, I get it. It takes a while sometimes to figure some of these things out, but you should have confidence in what you've invested in, the teams that you're bringing on, people you're collaborating with, and having a general working knowledge of how something should go is really, like you said, to your benefit. So nobody's taking advantage of you. And also when you're done with that collaboration or that contract runs out, you go, okay, I'm ready to do this, and you're not going, oh God, now what?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
So, go ahead.
Sorry. No, go ahead.
I was going to say, and then kind of, with understanding what's going on, what platforms you need to be on, how to access your accounts, and also that next step that, I've got this when things are handed back to you, is a working understanding of which marketing and promotional strategies are kind of like your main players and which ones are the supporting actors. So a successful author kind of knows which strategies they're going to go back to every time to kind of lead the charge when they release a new book, and then they have the supporting strategies that, again, they either do themselves or they hire out, whichever way they want to go about it, but that they kind of keep the train moving continually, because marketing and promotion really can't ever stop entirely. That's just not a luxury any of us have. Right. Even really successful authors, that's why they have social media. That's why, they have ways to stay top of mind, even between big book releases, but really have a working understanding of what you need to do to really set each release up for success versus the kind of things you can lean on throughout the year to keep your name out there and to stay connected with your readers and your potential buyers is also a really important aspect of kind of achieving that long-term success.
Yeah, absolutely. That is absolutely true. And I think that when you have the confidence and the understanding, the process by and large becomes much less overwhelming in general.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's so much more. And we've talked about this recently, Penny, how even stuff that when we know it's going to be a big project, or once we sit down, we know we need to sit down and fully immerse ourselves in that one thing for 2, 3, maybe even 4 hours. It's so much more overwhelming. But, when those things that you just understand and can check off your list, those are the sweet spots where you go, I am doing so well.
Yeah.
They make you feel really good about yourself. And the more you know, the easier those become. And you get a lot more of those easy wins too, by educating yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So what was the next one?
The next one was the strategies that you were
time. I think the time, so we covered supporting actors and main players. We covered, this is a good one. I like that we're kind of, this one was nestled in the end of being smart about where you spend your time.
Yeah, being mindful of time sucks.
Yes.
Okay. So I talk to a lot of authors who spend a lot of time on like TikTok and new platforms and things like that. Be mindful of, it's very easy to get lured into the idea of, I'm going to get on TikTok because I just read an article about an author who is now a best-selling author on TikTok and selling tons, and she has a Netflix series and blah, blah, blah. Like, I get that. It's very enticing, but understand that he or she was probably on TikTok multiple times a day, every day, all the time, doing creative videos. So I'm not discouraging you from TikTok at all. If you have that kind of time and you want to make that kind of investment, great. But understand the things that are just going to be time sucks. So one of the many reasons that Amy and I work so well together is I tend to drive, 200 miles an hour towards ideas. Like I was like, when I told her, I said, we should just merchandise stuff. This is going to be awesome. We can just sell all the things. It's going to be great. Amy tends to push me back when I get too close to these time suck things. So, and part of it is because it's very alluring. She's like, oh, this is going to be so much fun. And then you start to think about all of the other things that come into play, right? So let's just stay with the social media site. So you have another social media site. It requires some care and feeding. There's a lot that you have to do. Do you really want to commit that long term? Because otherwise, if you start up, and whether it's TikTok or Instagram or Facebook or whatever, if you're successful in one social media portal, maybe stick there, because starting up another one is going to require, a renewed commitment and a lot of work and a lot of time. But it's not just social media. I mean, I just think that there are a lot of time sucks in the industry that maybe aren't worth your time. One of them that I can think of right now is designing your own website. So that's something that there's a lot of places out there right now with Squarespace and whatnot that you can very cheaply design your own website. If you are inclined to do that, if you have an eye for color and branding and you have a vision for what your site's going to look like, knock yourself out. 95% of us don't have that. We don't have that vision. I could know more. I actually designed almost 21 years ago. I designed our first website. It's really awful. Like, please do not go on the Wayback Machine and look up this website. It's awful. In fact, I was interviewed in More Magazine about websites. It's a weird topic to think that More Magazine would do something on this, and my quote was, my first website looked like a dog designed it after an all-night tequila bender. So really, and I spent hours on this. Site. Figure out where you're spending your time and don't throw all of your time down a black hole. So that's my lesson. dog on tequila, overnight bender. Not sure that's a thing, but it was a funny quote, and More Magazine loved it. And it was true because the website looked awful.
That's pretty good. I mean, it's crazy how much the website has changed, but anyway, but yeah, that's very true. Ooh, the time sucks. I mean, we all go through it, but yeah, I know everybody's like, Amy's a real buzzkill, but it's absolutely true. I totally
no, she's no, and I really much appreciate that. I mean, sometimes I do sort of think that to myself. I'm like, she's killing my buzz again. This was such a fun idea. I want to sell all the things, but at the end, she's typically she's right. I mean, because I look at stuff and I think, oh yeah, you're right. Because it's very easy to get excited about an idea. Like, I'm going to do all of this, like you run into this author and she writes a book every month and you think, well, I can do that. And then you get halfway down the rabbit hole of doing, you realize that the reason this author can do this every month is because he or she has a system in place. They have an editor on call. They have a book to cover person on call. I mean, there's a lot that goes into this. So yeah.
Extraterrestrial help. Like
what?
I said extraterrestrial help. There's all sorts of things behind the scenes.
Oh yeah. A book a month. I mean, wow. Yeah.
I know. And then this also goes into, this is another huge one. And we did a dedicated episode to this in December, but it's also, success is weighed a lot on making the right publishing choices. And, I think for a lot of really successful authors, Penny, it tends to be a mix of trying different things, really. By the end, when they finally, you know what I mean, down the road, it's like, wow, I've tried this a few different ways. Yes, there are authors that have always been self-published that do really well. Of course, there are authors that have always been traditionally published that do really well. But I think there's a huge majority that have tried different publishing options, before they land on what really works for them.
Yeah.
And I think being in this kind of fits in with the change thing, in failing fast. Like there's a lot that ties into this, is just kind of recognizing what's working and what's not, and taking the initiative to try something different and do it better the next time. And so definitely, and then the education piece, this works in with that too. Educate yourself on the pros and cons of all your different publishing choices as well before, when you start thinking like, I'm going to go this direction. So educate yourself first, know the pros and cons of any decision you could make. And then also down the road, don't be afraid to try something different if you feel like you're being held back by a previous publishing choice.
Yeah, I think that one of the things, to your point, making good decisions when it comes to publishing choices, do look for that podcast. It was published, I'm pretty sure, in late November or December. But if you make a bad publishing choice, goes back to the second point that we talked about today. Fail fast, move on. See if you can get away from them if they're negatively impacting your success. But education will help you. Educating yourself will help you make better choices in all the things. So the final one for today is branding. And branding is the most boring topic, because most of the time I talk about branding and I can see people in the class when I teach these classes, they just sort of glaze over like, but it's more than just a logo. Readers are very brand loyal. And your brand is your promise to your reader, right? But it's also how you're showing up in the world. And whether or not you like it, your brand is talking about you, whether you're even aware of it. So the font color on your website, we did an entire podcast on this too, that I want you to take a look at. 7-figure authors, even 6-figure authors, and 5-figure authors know this, how important their brand is, the overall look of their website, their book covers. And this is why some authors decide to rebrand themselves or reissue book covers, sometimes even multiple times a year. Branding is so important. It is how you show up in the world. We obsess about our branding to the point that it's almost unhealthy. I'm not really, but it is extremely important. And how you show up, what your books look like. Do they look similar? Do they look like the genre that they're in? And all of these things that fall under the umbrella of the profitable author don't always have to do with your bottom line, but they will absolutely contribute to your bottom line. When you're making better decisions, when you're, moving on from mistakes, when you're failing up, all of these things are the qualities, I guess. And maybe we should have named the podcast The Qualities of the Profitable Author, but they are the qualities of the authors that we see that are very successful. And we want that for you too. Even though I realize we're not allowed to put out there for 2022 that we're going to be successful.
Just saying it was on a meme. I guess we don't all have to follow it.
Oh my gosh. Well, listen, thank you all so much for tuning into our first show of 2022. We wish you tremendous success. Thank you for tuning back in. We're starting our second year. In February will be 2 years that we have been doing this podcast, and we have had a lot of fun doing it. So thank you again for listening. We love a review. Wherever you listen to podcasts, please leave us a review. We're not asking for a 5-star review, but we would love a good review and your feedback. This is Penny Sansevieri and Amy Cornell, and this is the Book Marketing Tips and Author Success Podcast. Bye-bye.